Hi, Melanie.
Hi.
Um, for everybody out there, this is Melanie. Melanie is the president and CEO of Away Home Canada, working together to end youth homelessness. And she is one of our clients, and like everybody, has experienced the pandemic in the last 6 months and has had to adapt and change, and wanted to kind of talk to you today about how that has happened for you and what that looked like. And so I guess to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about Away Home and the work that you do there, which is very important?
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for having me. Away Home is a national coalition working to reimagine solutions to youth homelessness. And we do that through transformations in public policy, community-based planning, and on-the-ground practice with community service providers. And we also lead the National Learning Community on youth homelessness, which is a pan-Canadian network of service providers working together in community of practice for our common cause. We're based in Toronto, but we have folks all around Canada. We also, if you were to Google Away Home, you would see a number of communities in Canada, but also countries around the world that have adopted the Away Home brand. It's not really a brand. We're not really, we're not about replicating ourselves, but what we have done is inspired communities and countries to engage in a movement for change where we focus on the prevention of youth homelessness instead of letting young people become mired in homelessness, which is really devastating for them.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody was prepared for the pandemic, but, you know, to the extent possible, do you feel that Away Home was prepared and able to transition as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think there are a number of things that set us up really well for success, and you're right. Who's ever really ready for a pandemic? Definitely not our governments, apparently. But yeah, so a few distinguishing features for us. As I mentioned, we have team members located in different parts of the country, and we work with communities across Canada. And so we were already pretty well steeped in the virtual environment and the use of online tools. And so that really gave us an edge when the pandemic came down, because we were already used to working from home and collaborating online. Now, the other thing that was really unique for us is, and this is a huge shout out to Stern Cohen, is we had worked with you, Laura, and your team over the last couple of years to move all of our financial systems into the cloud. And so we were prepared. We only had a handful of funders that still like to, you know, put the stamp on the envelope and stick the old check in the mail. And so I have had to go into the office with, you know, mask, hand sanitizer, feel my way around in the dark to try and find out where the mail is. But I've been able to retrieve those checks, and thankfully now those same funders are set up with online banking. And so I'm fairly certain that we're going to be 100% in the cloud moving forward. And, you know, to be honest, it just makes everything easier. Yeah, I know people get nervous about a lack of paper trail, but there are checks and balances available with online systems that have been really useful. And so we're all really quite comfortable with that now. In terms of funding, many organizations are really struggling with funding because of the pandemic, and for obvious reasons. Something unique about us that's been helpful is that we're not donor-based at this point. And we also don't rely on events and, you know, fundraising galas and such like that to raise our dollars. We have a handful of committed funders and some support from the Government of Canada as well for some of our work that's multi-year funding. And so this year, you know, we're okay weathering the pandemic. Yeah, it's next year and after, that's where all the uncertainties lie, for sure.
Yeah. Given where governments are going and where funding is going to come from down the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So have you noticed, you know, obviously you mentioned that, you know, we had worked together to get Away Home set up in the cloud, but now you mentioned that some of your funders have also moved to a virtual environment. And so that has been sort of an impact, a positive impact of the pandemic, even on your funders moving to a virtual or cloud-based paperless environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's long overdue. I mean, I was even listening to a piece on the CBC about how the justice system is modernizing, and it took the pandemic to get them there. And I keep thinking,
Yeah.
why is it that I still have to telephone for my doctor's appointment? And why are they not using video conferencing? But hopefully they'll get
Yeah.
it as well.
Did you get any outside support or advisory through the pandemic, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mostly, we have a fantastic board of directors that are all no strangers to crises. So even though this one is quite unique, I think I've gotten a ton of support there, and even moral support, because this is all such strange territory for us to navigate. So having a strong board of directors has been great. But you, Laura, and team, I think it's been really important that you've been advising us on what government programs we're eligible for at this time, and what things will be helpful for us as we navigate the pandemic moving forward. Because as we're hearing from the numbers, we're not out of this yet.
No, not for a while, probably.
Yeah, but other than that, just negotiating. And I think some organizations, they don't have the in-house expertise or anyone advising them about what is available to them. So we've tried really hard with our network of service providers to, as we have information, make that information available to them as well. Especially like even early in the pandemic, when it was very clear that the CERB, the emergency benefit, would be available. Our service providers were all very anxious about whether or not young people experiencing homelessness, so their clients, would be eligible for the CERB. And
Right.
and the eligibility criteria, at times was a bit fuzzy. So helping them navigate that. And then also even, giving them the heads up early on that we knew the program was going to be administered through the CRA. And so that for any of their clients, they would need to be in the system. And so for a lot of young people who are experiencing homelessness, they may not have ever filed taxes. And so really important to front load that work to be ready for the emergency benefits. And so we've been an advisor ourselves, taking the information we get from you to the sector.
Yeah. That's good. And that's so critical in the not-for-profit space too, to share resources and make sure you communicate amongst one another, because, the not-for-profit world is,
Absolutely.
Funding is always a challenge, and, so that's great. COVID has kind of become the new reality. And so rather than, dealing in sort of crisis mode, now everybody's sort of pivoting and looking towards the future. And so what will you be focusing on in the coming months?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, doing that critical work of providing support to our community providers as they work with young people and families. We have a number of demonstration projects in Ontario and Alberta, but then also in BC and Newfoundland and Labrador, where we've partnered with community partners to provide prevention-based services to young people and their families. And what we're finding in the context of the pandemic is that supporting families is even more important than ever, because a family that was already in crisis is now stretched that much more thin. And a young person that's about to walk out that door because they just can't make it work in the family home, it's that much more likely that that's going to happen. And so our work with family and natural supports and a model called Youth Reconnect is all about supporting young people and families in crisis. So we'll be heavily focused on just making sure that work, which is so important, is in front of government, and in front of communities, and in front of funders, to see just how relevant it is that we continue to stop young people from becoming homeless. If you look at, I think communities and anyone listening to this, I think, the pandemic has really exposed that it's dangerous and kind of insane to warehouse people in the best of times. in emergency shelters. But during a pandemic where we don't want young people to end up are in shelters.
Yeah.
We need to do everything we can to keep young people and their families stable and safe. So I think, our work becomes even more relevant now than ever before, and hopefully new attention will be drawn to that fact.
Yeah, it's almost like, the pandemic has drawn attention to it in an even bigger light. That's good. Was there anything that happened as a result of the lockdown or the pandemic that surprised you, even amongst your team? I know you have a phenomenal team that, supports you at Away Home. Was there anything that kind of surprised you or you were really impressed with? Or
let's see. Wow. It's been a very dramatic couple of months. On the personal front, my husband and I took possession of our new home the week of the provincial lockdown, Ontario countryside. So it's been a huge, for all of us, it's been a huge change of pace, because so much of my work is outward facing, thought leadership, meeting with governments, meeting with communities, giving presentations and talks, getting people inspired to do this work differently. And I've had to shift from doing all that outward facing work and being on the road pretty much nonstop. And Laura, you'll know from processing my expense reports to trying to maximize the virtual environment to continue to do that work. And the same with all of our team members. And so I think what we've been really surprised about is just how effective we're still able to be. And so I think that's gonna, there will always be the need and desire to bring people together, because there's magic that happens when you bring people together. But I think what we're all finding is that perhaps what it looks like after the pandemic doesn't have to be as resource intense and as devastating to the planet in terms of the destruction of having people in airplanes nonstop, moving about. So I think there's a lot to be learned from this to be applied moving forward.
Looking forward, are you optimistic?
Well, Laura, you've known me for a few years now. I am a very optimistic person by nature.
That's
so,
true. That's true.
Sadly, a pandemic and Trump combined can't get me down. But and feel free to edit that if you like. But I'm incredibly optimistic because I'm interested to see what the throne speech and then the address later in the evening by Trudeau holds for us. That'll be interesting. But yeah, no, I think there's a huge appetite out there for really using the pandemic as a moment to rethink some critical things, especially when it comes to the social safety net and how we take care of ourselves and our fellow Canadians. I think that that's really hopeful. And we may squander that opportunity and come out the other side with more of the same, and that would be a shame.
It would be. Yeah, it would be. I think this is a huge opportunity in so many ways, but yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. It was really great to hear more about Away Home and the work that you're doing and how I think you were pretty well set up before all of this, as far as your remote teams and your virtual environment and everything, but how it's impacted you and your organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to Stern Cohen.